Thanks for allowing me to share a little information about this new pest. And I'm only going to be able to cover the basics, and I'm not the leading expert on this by any means. The information that I've obtained is mostly from the Department of Agriculture or our own DCNR Division of Forest Health, and also Penn State. They've been doing a lot of the research on this and trying to get information out about this new pest. I'm going to cover basically three parts here this morning. One is, what is the spotted lanternfly? Then what does it do? And then what are some things that we can do about it? So this is an adult spotted lanternfly. It is a non-native insect pest. It's in the family of insects known as the plant hoppers or leaf hoppers. We have many native leaf hoppers in Pennsylvania. Most of them are about 1/4 of an inch long, but the spotted lanternfly is really a giant among leaf hoppers. It's 1 inch long and 1/2 inch wide as an adult. Very characteristic, very easy to recognize by looking at them. They have very unique coloration, so they have this sort of gray color with black dots as an adult and very large. One of the other key identification factors is as they jump or fly and they lift their wings, you can see the hind wing is red. So you get this flash of red as they fly away. And so that's very characteristic. There really isn't any other bug that looks like them. If you see you might mistake it at first for a moth because it is so large, but if you get a good look at it, they're easy to identify. Like other plant hoppers, they feed through a mouth that's more like a straw. So they're called piercing and sucking. So the tip of their proboscis, their mouth part, is able to chew a hole right through the bark, even of a tree. So they can land on the side of a tree and they chew a tiny little hole, and they stick their straw-like mouth in that hole and start sucking on the sap. That's the way they feed. Of course, they can feed on soft tissue, but one of the things that's unique about these insects is the way that they are able to penetrate bark. Now, they can't penetrate very thick bark, say on an oak tree or a large mature tree very easily. They would feed on the twigs very readily, and even on the trunk of relatively thin bark trees. So for example, Marci, you mentioned the aspen, and they're also known to feed on birch trees, and they have a lot of their favorite trees have relatively thin bark. So that's one of the things about these insects, is the way they suck the sap out and feed on.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, Steve, I was thinking that's why they loved my my aspen. It's such a thin bark tree.
Yeah, and almost any tree they can feed on the twigs where the bark is already thin, but yeah, they have their preferences. They'll feed on up to 70 different plants, and not just trees. Although trees and vines are among their favorites, they can feed on things in your garden, flowers, fruit. They'll feed directly on the fruit sometimes. But their main thing is on trees and vines, and their favorites are the tree of heaven. We'll talk about a little bit more how to identify that in a minute. But things like grapevines, they are a major pest on vineyards. They also will feed on walnut and silver maple. Among the maples, the silver maple is their favorite, pretty clearly, pretty distinctly. For some reason, they don't feed on Norway maples, and they don't feed as much on sugar maple, but they love silver maple. They have one generation per year. So right now they're in the egg stage. Over winter as an egg, the adults pretty much all die off with a good hard freeze. So they were pretty active all throughout October this year and into November. And then we had that real hard freeze here about a week or so ago. And that pretty much put a stop to the adults. But before that, they had a chance to lay their eggs. So they lay eggs, and those eggs overwinter. Then they hatch as nymphs in the spring, usually in May around here. And then they have 4 molts as a nymph, and then become adults late summer, as early as July, usually like late July. And then the rest of the year we see them as adults. The eggs, once you kind of tune your eye into them, they're pretty well camouflaged, but you can recognize the eggs. They're usually covered with kind of this smooth substance that makes it look like somebody stuck chewing gum in the bark of the tree, or maybe some body putty. It's kind of that color. They'll lay their eggs pretty much anywhere, on the tree, on rocks, on cars, on playground equipment, side of your house, anything. And they aren't always covered with that protective coating. Sometimes they're without a covering, like this slide shows them on the left. The females will lay 30 to 50 eggs, and they might lay 2 different batches. Sometimes they cover them, sometimes they're partly covered. And then on this slide on the right-hand side is an uncovered egg mass that is also an old egg mass that the nymphs have already hatched. So you can see little holes there. Kind of gives it a chain-like appearance to that egg mass. It's a series of eggs. So right now you might be able to find these egg masses out on your property, and we'll talk more about one of the things to do, but learning to recognize these egg masses can be really helpful in trying to control the population for next year. This is what the nymphs look like. They go through 4 stages. Stage 1, 2, and 3 as a nymph look pretty much alike, just a little bit bigger as they grow. This little black bug with white dots. They do not fly in the nymph stage, but they are very much able to crawl and hop. So they can get around pretty well in this stage. They just can't fly, but they have ways of getting around to find the plants that they like. And this is a stage when they're most likely to maybe feed on your garden plants and tender plants that might be around your landscape. They'll also feed on trees at this stage as well. Their 4th stage as a nymph, they turn red, black with white dots. So it's a very unique looking bug. There really isn't anything else looks like that, especially not around here. So that's the 4th instar nymph. And again, they pretty much just spend their days looking for something to feed on. They'll feed for a while, and then apparently they get full and they have to take a rest. And sometimes they will fall to the ground, or they'll find a place to rest. And then they get hungry again, and they'll climb up and find another spot to feed. So during the day, they will feed a number of different spots, sometimes all on the same plant, sometimes they'll move from plant to plant, but they have ways of getting around to find their favorites. So here on the left is a young ailanthus stem covered with nymphs. These are probably 3rd instar nymphs lining up there on the side of that ailanthus stem. And some of them are feeding and some of them are resting at this point. In the middle is a basil plant. So there's someone's garden plant that is suffering pretty severely from the nymphs that are punching holes in that plant and sucking the sap out of it. Because of the way they move around, even if you kill all of the nymphs on your plant, more might move in tomorrow. So they're constantly on the move, and if you have a plant that they like, you're probably going to have waves of these bugs moving in throughout the summer. On the right-hand side are adults. And these adults, again, some are resting, some are feeding on a relatively thin bark tree. This is a sycamore in the park. They can kill plants. So you can see from the basil there, they're able to kill tender garden plants. They can kill grapevines pretty easily. And on ailanthus trees with repeated feeding over a couple of years, very, very heavy feeding, even the ailanthus trees can die. And so that's in a way that's good news, because the ailanthus is a invasive weed. But young newly planted trees are especially vulnerable, maybe fruit trees, maybe trees that are planted in your yard or riparian areas. And they can kill young trees that are weakened, especially if they're being attacked year after year. One of the other things about this plant, or this insect, this pest, is that they secrete a honeydew. So that honeydew is their excrement, high in sugar, and if you have a really bad infestation of these pests in the treetops, it'll be like rain. a little fine mist of rain that comes down. It's basically sugar water, and it coats everything and quickly gets mold covered and mildewed, and it's a really horrible mess. Very sticky. If it's on your deck or on your patio furniture or even on your car, it's really hard to get off. And that's one of the most annoying things about this pest. So what are some things we can do about it? One of the things right now is to recognize those egg masses that are out there. Again, they can be on anything. They might be on tree bark. They might be on telephone poles. They might be on your lawn furniture. This on the right, I think, is the underside of a picnic table. So you can see the egg masses that are there. So you can, when you want to go out and see what you can do about the spotted lanternfly, you can scrape those egg masses off. There, the picture of the illustration on the left shows a person using a little twig, but something like a credit card actually works really well to scrape those egg masses off. And you can scrape them into a container with some 50% isopropyl alcohol. Works really good to kill those eggs. And all the ones that you can reach. That's about 50 nymphs and adults that you're not going to see next year. So that can be a real helpful thing to do around your property. Of course, they move. It's not doesn't going to mean that you can really control the population, but it is something that can be a help. Another thing you can do with the egg masses that you might not be able to reach is to spray them or paint them with some type of oil, a horticultural oil or a dormant oil that you might use on your fruit trees. You can spray that on the egg masses or paint it on the egg masses, and that will kill most of the eggs, maybe not 100%. And if you don't have any dormant oil around, you can use soybean oil. That's been demonstrated to work very well. Dilute the soybean oil by 50% with water. Of course, you have to keep that agitated, but that's been proven to be very effective at killing the egg mass. Another thing you can do, because the ailanthus tree or tree of heaven is such a key or favorite host plant for this insect, if you eliminate the tree of heaven from your property, you might reduce the attractiveness to this pest, this insect. So this is how to identify the tree of heaven. On the left is the seeds. Now, most of the seeds, you might be able to find seed clusters. They're going to be dried out and brown this time of year, light brown. But you might see that on the female trees. There are female and male trees of the tree of heaven. Then there's a picture here of the leaf and the bark. And then from a distance, this is a female tree that's loaded with flowers turning into seeds there on the right-hand side. So the tree of heaven is a very nasty, pesty tree. It's very much found along highways or railroad lines and industrial areas. It's not a very desirable tree for landscapes or residential areas, but they do pop up sometimes, and it'd be good to get rid of as many of these as you can. At one point in time, we thought that perhaps it might be even required for the life cycle of the spotted lanternfly, but that's been proven to be false. But the spotted lanternfly really like the tree of heaven, and they thrive on it. It really has been demonstrated that when they feed on the tree of heaven, they're more robust, they grow faster, they produce more eggs. So eliminating the tree of heaven can help to slow down the population growth of the spotted lanternfly. The tree of heaven can easily be confused with the sumac. So this is a sumac. It's a native plant, very beneficial for wildlife. So don't kill sumac. Make sure you identify and tell the difference between the sumac and the tree of heaven. Some other things that we might be able to do. They are relatively easy to kill with insecticides, but if you don't want to use insecticides, and you have a tree that in your yard that is a favorite of the spotted lanternfly, you can use sticky bands. These are commercially produced bands just for such a purpose, and you put them around the stem of your tree. And because of that way that they drop off the tree and then they climb back up again repeatedly throughout the day, you can kill lots and lots. It works especially well for when they're in that nymphal stage. It also works for the adults, but the nymph stage is when you can really have the best impact. And if you have a tree that you notice is one of their favorites, then sticky band can be real effective. And I'd suggest that you just put it up for a short period of time when the nymphs are the most active, because you do get some beneficial insects that will get stuck and killed by these sticky bands, and even birds have been found to get stuck in these sticky bands. So they have some drawbacks, but they can be an effective way to trap and kill the spotted lanternfly. And perhaps you've seen or heard about traps. There's all kinds of different ingenious traps that people have invented and constructed. You can construct your own. I think there are some commercial traps that are also available. Once again, this takes advantage of that habit that the spotted lanternfly have, both in the nymph stage and the adult stage, to climb up the stem of anything. I mean, you can use these traps on a telephone pole and catch them, because they just jump on the object, they climb up, and they're searching for feeding sites, and you can catch them in these traps. It climbs up in that sort of funnel-shaped netting, and eventually into the plastic bag. These traps, the way they're designed, they're very good at catching the spotted lanternfly and less good at catching other bugs that are smart enough to find their way out. But the spotted lanternflies tend to get stuck in these. So that's another tool you can use to try to reduce them and reduce the damage that they cause. One of the most important things that we can do is to pay attention when you're traveling, when you're moving anything. At this stage, at this time of the year, they're in the egg stage. So if you're moving something that might have eggs attached, try to scrape them off before you move it. You might be moving, I don't know, something up to your hunting camp in northern Pennsylvania and taking some stuff along up there. Make sure you're not moving the eggs at this time of year. During the summertime, the adults especially are very good hitchhikers, and they'll climb on anything like trains and cars and trailers. And it's really important. You don't have to worry about it if you're just going around the block to the grocery store or something like that. But if you're traveling outside of the infested area, look over your vehicle, spend a couple minutes and look for potential spotted lanternfly that might be hanging on. It's amazing. They can hold on to the side of a car when you're going down the highway at 65 miles an hour. They do hitchhike really, really well. And you have to look around the grill, around the bumpers, and around the tires, that's the wheel wells, around the license plate. Those are the places they like to hide. So one of the very most important things that we need to do is to look at our vehicles before we travel outside of the area where they're already well established. And here's the map of that area. It's now in 34 counties in Pennsylvania. It's also found in, I think, most of Delaware, parts of Maryland, and in New Jersey. And this map shows the counties in Pennsylvania where the spotted lanternfly is now established. I'm sure it's been found in like Center County, for example, but it's not known to be there as an established pest. It's also been found as far west as the state of Indiana. Once again, I don't think it's been known to be established in Indiana, but individual spotted lanternfly have made it that far, probably hitchhiking on cars or trains. So
is that following a transportation corridor, Steve? I mean, it's interesting how it's just lined up across the lower tier.
It absolutely is following the transportation corridors, yes. And especially trains, for some reason, they seem to hitchhike well on trains.
Okay.
But they hitchhike on cars and lots of other stuff too. It's amazing how they do that, but they'll jump on anything and hang on. So we need to be vigilant, try to slow the spread down. So that's the basics. So what we can do, kill them lots of different ways, even shop vacs. So Marci, I heard your description of how you can suck them up with a shop vac, and you can squish them. There's lots of insecticides. They're relatively easy to kill, lots of different ways. One thing I didn't mention, but that it has been a technique that the Department of Agriculture is using is a trap tree technique with Ailanthus. So what they'll do is they'll find an area with Ailanthus, remove most of the Ailanthus, using herbicides and cutting them out, and leaving a few behind as traps so that the spotted lanternfly will be attracted to those individual ailanthus trees, and then they inject a systemic insecticide in those remaining ailanthus trees and kill the spotted lanternfly that way. And that has been a pretty effective way when you have a spot like a industrial area that has a lot of ailanthus. You can kill a lot of spotted lanternfly by using the trap tree technique. And then don't move spotted lanternfly. Look before you move anything. Look for eggs this time of year, and then especially when the adults are active in late summer, try to make sure you're not giving them a free ride somewhere else in Pennsylvania or to another state. That's my quick overview of the spotted lanternfly. I don't know if we have any questions, but I'll be happy to take some questions if we have time.
I have a couple of questions. I do want to put a pitch in for many of our friends groups sell firewood at the campgrounds, and part of the reason they do this is to reduce the transportation of invasive pests and diseases such as the spotted lanternfly. So when you're purchasing your firewood from a friends group, not only is it reducing transportation of firewood, but it's also supporting projects in that particular park. So that's one of the things that as campers, that you can do to protect our ecosystems is to not transport your firewood.
Yep.
One of my questions, Steve, is you mentioned that the long cold probably knocked them out currently. I know for some invasive insects, such as the hemlock woolly adelgid, if we have like a really long cold winter, it can set it back. Do we know enough about the spotted lanternfly that if we have a really long cold winter, that's one of the things that we could be celebrating, is the fact that even though we're cold, maybe the spotted lanternfly population is going to be reduced significantly. Do we know enough about it yet?
I do not know about it. I have not heard that we're really hoping for that. I think there will be a limit as to how far north they will spread, but I don't think we really know that yet. We do know that they are well established in northern parts of China, South Korea, and Japan. And I'm not sure how far north in the Korean Peninsula they've moved, or how far north in Japan, but they're mostly a Southeast Asian insect. So I think they do have some kind of a limit to their cold, but I don't think we know what that is yet.
Okay. Another question that I had as you were talking is, you mentioned the honeydew, and it's my understanding that not only is the honeydew unpleasant, is that it can develop a mold on it.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what the implications of that are?
Well, I think there's actually a couple different species of mold, but it's normally a black mold that develops really quickly, and that, as it coats, let's say, other plants, ground plants that are on the ground cover plants, young seedlings, it will actually basically smother. It blocks out the sunlight to those leaves, and so it would kill the plants. So it does kill, basically wipes out what's on the ground when there's really heavy infestation of the spotted lanternfly because of the mold that grows on the honeydew. So it's not the honeydew itself that's really harmful, but the mold that grows on it. And I don't think the mold is like really toxic to the plants, but it just blankets it blocks out the sunlight.
Right.
And it, of course, mold, lots of people are allergic to molds, and there are a couple different species of molds that will grow basically on any kind of sugary substance. So that's what we're seeing.
Okay. Thank you. So far, no questions in the chat box. I do have a few others if nobody else has any. I have to look at my notes, though. I was writing them down as you were talking.
I've relocated.
I see that. I see you, like you're lingering outside of somebody's door. Kind of creepy.
Sorry. I was losing our internet connection, so that's not good.
Oh no. Oh no.
And while you're looking at your notes, Marci, I just wanted to announce that our winner of our coffee press is Megan Cronin. So thank you, Megan, for your donation. And
so I would imagine if you're adverse to insecticides, pesticides, that when they're in the nymph and the end star, hand picking is really the only way to remove them from. I mean, my basil didn't do well this year. Now I'm thinking maybe I should have looked at it better, because we had so many adult spotted lanternflies, so is really hand picking the way to go, or for when they're in that stage of their life cycle?
Well, I'm guessing it's going to be a lot like I handpick Japanese beetles off my roses, and that's all summer. I try and do it twice a day, and it seems like they just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And I think that's the way it would be for the spotted lanternfly. If they have a favorite food, you can pick them, and then tomorrow there'll be a whole new batch that are there to need to be picked off. So it can be a very frustrating exercise to try to pick, especially the nymphs. They're going to be pretty hard to catch. They jump and run pretty quickly. So they're not that easy to hand pick, but you can do that. That certainly is one technique. I would recommend that maybe something like a sticky trap or some other type of trap might be better than hand picking.
And a sticky trap, can people get that like any hardware store? Is that something that's...
I think in the areas where the spotted lanternfly is well established, I think a lot of the hardware stores are going to be stocking up on those and having those available, or garden centers, that type of thing. Yeah, they should be available.
And I think it's really important, the map that you showed, and I think that's something that maybe we want to put on our PPFF website, is the fact that if you are traveling in the area, during the different life cycles of the spotted lanternfly, it is really important to check your gear. Whether it be your backpacking gear if you're out, for multiple days, or your camper or your car, because you don't want to be taking it into new areas. Because as you said, Steve, it's not just about the ailanthus, it's about a lot of different tree species, as well as, cash crops, orchard crops, and it could be very decimating to not just our forested ecosystems, but to agriculture in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's one of our key industries in the state.
That's right. And that's how this pest got here. It was on some packing shipping material that came from Asia, and that's how it got here. And, we don't want to add to that problem. The same thing is true for like gypsy moth. You don't want to move gypsy moth eggs or larvae around, or, egg laying females. You want to check your equipment, check your camper, and make sure that you're not giving any of these nasties a free ride.
Yes. And to clarify, if you're scraping egg masses, as you just mentioned, you want to scrape them into something. It doesn't do any good just to scrape them, because if they land on the ground, they could still be viable egg masses.
That's right. Now, on the ground, they're more likely to get picked up by like ants or something else like that. But yeah, they can survive on the ground and hatch. So you definitely want to catch them and put them in something that'll kill those eggs, like alcohol.
Okay, great. Pam, do you have any questions for Steve?
I don't. I hope I did the right thing by running across the street and going right into the car wash.
Yeah, I mean, this is really one of those cases where the actions that we take as individuals can make a huge difference to reducing the spread of this insect pest and to protecting our natural assets.
And I think there is some hope. If it's in your neighborhood and all your neighbors are kind of working together, you can overall reduce the impact. You're not going to eliminate them completely, but you can reduce the impact. Because they do move around, they keep moving, and if everybody does a little bit, that can help a lot to reduce the impact in a like a neighborhood area.
It's good teamwork. This will be teamwork.
Yeah. There you go.
And I have to say, when you showed the how it ate with a close up of its feeding parts, it really did look like something you'd find in a horror movie. They're pretty from afar, but that viewpoint, it was like, wow, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, that particular angle, that would make a good 1950s B movie. Yeah.
Yes, it would. Definitely.
I smell a fundraiser.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was very informative. And as I mentioned, this will stay on our YouTube and Facebook channel. I think it's really important for Pennsylvanians to know how they can combat this insect and this being informed is the first step. And this was a very informative presentation. So
Thank you very much. I'll just add that there is a lot of information out there, like how to build a trap and different insecticides that might be effective in your situation. So look for more information on the Department of Agriculture website and on the Penn State website for more information about how to deal with the spotted lanternfly.
Terrific.
A related question, but not exactly spotted lanternfly, is, you know, if somebody has a forested ecosystem and they have questions, I know that the Bureau of Forestry has service foresters. Can you just talk for a minute about what a service forester is and how somebody could contact a service forester?
Okay, yeah. So the service foresters are available to help people to manage their trees in their forests. Our Pennsylvania enabling law that created the Bureau of Forestry said that our job is to promote trees and forests, and one of the ways we do that is providing professionals to go out and talk to people. We're happy to talk to people on the phone or come out and look at your property and give you some advice about what you might be able to do. So there's lots of different programs that are available to provide a little bit of financial help as well when there's some practices like getting rid of Atlantis trees perhaps, or developing a management plan for your property. And so the service forester is a good first step to find out what kinds of programs might be available to help you out and just give you information.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't think people realize that the service foresters exist. So I thought it was a great opportunity to remind people that that service is available.
Yeah, contact your local district office and they'll put you in touch with the service forester for your county.
Yeah. And if you're not aware, there are 20 districts of in the Bureau of Forestry, and you can find the information on the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources website.
Yep.
So excellent.
Okay, thank you, Marci.
Yep.
Pam?
Yep. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
It was very
Thanks, Steve.
informative. Very appreciative.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.